overview of the WJ ECAD. It's the WJ Early Cognitive and Academic Development Test. Here's a picture of the WJ ECAD. As you'll see in the picture, there's one single easel, one manual, and a single response booklet for your students. There's also a CD-ROM, which is your technical manual, but if you don't have a CD-ROM on your computer, not to worry. You can always find our manuals and technical manuals in the resource tab of your online scoring platform. The WJ ECAD, the WJ Early Cognitive and Academic Development Test, is by the same authors of all of our WJ4 and WJ family assessments. It was released 1 year after the WJ4 in 2015. The WJ ECAD is co-normed with all of the WJ batteries, and that means the achievement, the cognitive, and the oral language batteries. The age range is 2.5 through 7 years, 11 months, with an extended age range of 8 through 9 years, 11 months for more cognitively delayed children. The items and artwork are specifically designed for the young learner in mind. It's engaging, and it really does make the kids excited to sit down and test. There's better item density than the WJ4, and it's, again, a single easel test book, so it's easy to bring around, put it in a bag, and go test those young kids. The test was normed on about 2,400 children. And just to note, this is not a pullout of the WJ4, but rather some downward extensions of some of the WJ4 tests you know and love, as well as some unique tests. The design goals of the WJ4 were easy. We know we needed something. We needed something to respond to the cognitive abilities and academic skills in young children. Although the WJ4 tests of achievement, cognitive ability, and oral language are all developed for ages 2 through 90 plus, sometimes we heard from customers that the young child wasn't being captured adequately in our testing easels. The other design goal was to create some unique tests just for the ECAD and have them adapted as alternate forms of tests that are widely used in pre-K and kindergarten populations. Another design goal is to identify specific cognitive and academic delays during a critical window of a time when interventions are needed, and we know that it could be very impactful. The purposes of the ECAD are to assess, to determine, and to evaluate and develop. Let's talk about assessment. We're looking for those emerging cognitive abilities, those early academic skills, those building blocks on which every kid needs to know those in order to progress academically throughout the years. The ECAD also does look lightly at expressive language skills. It's not completely exhaustive. However, it will give you some idea of expressive language skills in this young age group. However, if this is a student that you're thinking has more of a speech and language impairment or a speech and language concern, of course, a more exhaustive speech and language evaluation is recommended. It also is used to assess the presence of developmental delays. Something very unique to the ECAD is the ability to run a report with months, percentage, and standard deviation delay scores. In order to determine different cognitive profiles of strengths and weaknesses, we would give the WJ ECAD, knowing that tests 1 through 7 is providing an actual GIA for these young children, and we'll get more into that in our next part. We'll also determine the severity of cognitive delay and impairment. You'll be able to see not only standard scores and percentile ranks, but RPI scores and also some of those delay scores I just mentioned. You could also determine growth over time. By starting with the WJ ECAD at a very young age, you're able to grow with the WJ assessment family over time. And of course, to determine eligibility for services. Knowing that you have the scores provided to you and some wonderful data to back up those scores, you could feel confident to use the WJ4 ECAD to make those decisions. The last purpose that I touch on is evaluate and develop. We need to do something more with these evaluation results. It's great to have a score report, but what do you do with it next? We develop individual education programs that are going to be targeted based on those student-specific scores, as well as doing some program evaluation and research over time. The organization of the ECAD is simple. It is 10 total tests. Tests 1 through 7 are what we consider our GIA, or the E-developmental GIA, for that early childhood, early intellectual ability scale. There's 7 tests in that segment, and each of them really follows our CHC theory of broad abilities that are noted there on the slide. There's memory for names, sound blending, picture vocabulary, verbal analogies, visual closure, sentence repetition, and rapid picture naming. Our early academic skills are tests 8 through 10. Those would be letter word identification, number series, and writing. Any test that you see there in those first 10 tests, those only 10 tests that have an asterisk, are actually going to be a test you would also find in the WJ4, either achievement, cognitive, or oral language batteries. However, keep in mind that the items will be different. So you're not going to have to worry about test, retest, reliability, and validity if you need to then give the WJ4 at some point to the same child. There will be different items. The last section there is expressive language. Now, there's not, again, 2 new subtests to really define this area, but if you notice, it's test 3, picture vocabulary, and test 6, sentence repetition, that comprise this area. This, again, will give you an idea of those expressive language skills from that young student. The qualification levels of the WJ ECAD are considered to be a high level. That means if you would like to purchase and also use this test, there are some requirements that make this test unique. Because there is a GIA in the first 7 tests, it is really wanted to have a psychologist or someone with cognitive training to go and administer this test. On the actual slide, you see that the level of education and training required would be a doctorate or a master's degree in a field closely related to the intended use of the assessment, which is a cognitive assessment. Or licensure or certification, like a school psychologist or a clinical psychologist, or licensure or certification in a field closely related to the intended use of the assessment, and membership in a professional organization, such as APA, NAS, NAN, or INS. That's what the level of the qualifications is, just based on the fact that we have a cognitive portion of the test. However, in practice, you could make this a multidisciplinary assessment overall. I've seen customers that will use tests 1 through 7 and have them administered by a school psychologist or a psychologist, and tests 8 through 10 will be administered by a special educator. It really is up to your team to decide what works best for you, knowing that the test overall, though, has that high qualification for the cognitive portion of the WJ4 ECAD.